Legends, folklore, mystery and conspiracy surrounding catastrophic occurrences on Malaysia's famed Karak Highway have been recounted over and over. The 60-kilometer Karak Expressway, which runs from Gombak North in Selangor to Karak's easternmost point in Pahang, was built between 1974 and 1979. It was constructed in the 1970s to replace the convoluted Route 68 in an effort to make travel easier. It also features the first highway tunnel ever built in Malaysia. Due to its lengthy history and the numerous accidents that have occurred there, this notorious highway has developed into the setting for numerous spooky and paranormal tales that have haunted Malaysians ever since and inspired horror films like Karak and Volkswagen Kuning. There are multiple accidents and fatalities reported on Karak Highway, even today. At kilometer 30.9 on the Karak Highway, around 5 kilometers from Genting Sempah Tunnel, a passenger bus collided with a gas truck, several FRU riot police vehicles, another truck, 2 taxis, and 6 cars on February 28, 1990. The crash claimed the lives of 15, and it injured another 16, one of the deadliest highway accidents in Malaysian history. On August 21, 2013, a bus traveling along the Genting Sempah, Genting Highlands Highway with 53 passengers on board lost control and crashed into a gully. There were 16 more injuries and 37 fatalities. From the start of the highway being accessible to the public to now, notorious horror tales are said to haunt Karak Highway. The Volkswagen Beetle has been one of the most famous and infamous stories of the Karak Highway, with the background story of this car still being a mystery. Many motorists in particular have seen a yellow Volkswagen Beetle car appearing ahead of them as they ride. The car would gradually reduce its speed and challenge drivers to overtake it. However, if you do overtake the yellow Beetle, it is said that the same yellow car would appear ahead of you again and again until you stop overtaking it. The rumor also claims that if you peek in the car's driver's seat as you pass it, you won't see anyone behind the wheel, and if you're lucky, the vehicle will accelerate and vanish. According to legend, years ago, a man along the highway, after learning about how his adulterous wife had betrayed him and taken all of his possessions, the man, full of anger and pain, sped off in his yellow Volkswagen Beetle in hopes of finding his wife, got into an accident, and died tragically along the Karak Highway. One of the reasons multiple accidents occurred in Karak had been linked to the yellow-colored Volkswagen Beetle is because it's believed that the man's soul, full of hatred and bitterness, takes his anger out on the drivers of other vehicles on the route. There are many encounters documented from all kinds of drivers. I've translated one account of a driver's run-in with the infamous ghost car. I rent an apartment in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm an assistant chef at one of Kuala Lumpur's premier hotels. My parents live around 270 miles away in Kedah. After not seeing my parents for a while, I decided it was time for a visit. I finished work at 4 p.m. one day, got back to my apartment an hour later, and started packing for my trip. I decided I would leave later on in the night, as temperatures would be cooler and the roads wouldn't be as busy. I left my home at around 10 p.m., hoping for an easy drive and looking forward to breakfast with my parents the next day. Around midnight, I start getting tired and irritated with the number of young drivers on the road, showing off, going faster than the speed limit. About 1 a.m., I pass through the highway area around Ipoh, continuing towards Jelapang. On the highway around Jelapang, I go through the Menorah Tunnel, driving at around 70 miles an hour. The road has a lot of bends, and by this point, I'm really tired, so I drive a little slower. I lit a cigarette and lowered the window a little. The radio wasn't working because of the tunnel, but the bright lights inside are helping me stay focused. I noticed that a car was rapidly approaching from behind, which I could see in the side view mirror. Whoever was driving the car had their full beams on, which blinded me. When it overtook, I saw it was a yellow vintage Volkswagen Beetle. The Beetle was going way too fast, and I slowed down to let them overtake me. I threw ash from my cigarette out the window, and when I looked up, the car had gone. Seconds later, I left the tunnel and continued on. Suddenly, the very same Volkswagen Beetle appeared right behind me again, lights shining and going over 100 miles an hour. I noticed this time around that there was no license plate on the car either. I also realized as I was veering out of its path that this model of car had a maximum speed of around 70 miles an hour, so the speeds it was doing shouldn't be possible. The car sped around the mountainous bend and disappeared again. Before I could even finish reflecting on the bizarreness of the two encounters with the car, I saw it coming up behind me yet again. Back with a vengeance, the car was careering right behind me, and I honestly thought it would go into the back of me. It was finally at this point that I remembered the urban legend of the yellow Volkswagen haunting this stretch. I slowed right down because I was afraid. I tried the radio again, but it still didn't work. I cursed myself for neglecting to bring a CD on the drive. I soon sensed that the Volkswagen was right next to me. I chanced to look, desperately trying to assuage my nerves, hoping that it was just another idiot young driver I had seen earlier. I did a double take. Nobody was driving. The shock caused me to hit the brakes. I tried to be cool and keep my eyes on the road. I drove for the next few minutes, terrified to look to see if the car was next to me. After a while, I chanced it and breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the Beetle had finally gone. I then proceeded to follow a truck to R&R Sungai Perak. I decided to call it a night, telling myself it would be safer for me to finish the journey to my parents the next day. I slept in my car and waited for the sun to rise. The next day, my journey went smoothly, but I will never forget my encounter with the yellow Volkswagen Beetle on the Karak highway. I continued to drive the automobile at night to get back to Kedah despite the horrible occurrence. However, I take care to depart early. I left around 8 o'clock to avoid the road being too deserted. But the yellow beetle isn't the only strange phenomenon haunting the Karak highway. One evening, a listener called the nearby radio station with a terrifying message. The caller's story was carefully listened to by the DJ. He claimed that while traveling on the highway, a terrible accident occurred. His vehicle slid off the road and down a ravine. His mother, father, wife, and kids were in the car with him. Speaking about how he had witnessed his family members passing away, he seemed despondent. He claimed that witnessing his own death was the saddest experience. Then, the line stopped working. The radio DJ made several unsuccessful attempts to return calls. He dismissed it as a prank, as did most radio listeners. The very next day, the media reported that an accident had occurred at the identical spot that the caller had described. A couple, their parents, and their children were all killed when a car that was passing by the Karak highway plunged into a ravine. The specifics supported the enigmatic man's account. The radio DJ allegedly hurried back to the office to listen to the recording of that call, but there was nothing but eerie quiet when he arrived. People have reported seeing a young schoolboy strolling through the dark Karak highway's roadside while appearing lost and lonesome. If you ever come across a youngster like this, do not stop. He is searching for his deceased mother and will keep asking, "Have you seen my mother?" repeatedly. A young boy wearing his school uniform and his mother, who was driving, allegedly got into an accident here once. As a result of the collision, she was flung out of the car, leaving the boy in the passenger seat with windscreen glass in his eyes. He is allegedly still roaming the same roadway today in search of his mother, who he adores. Many drivers who traveled along the Karak highway reported seeing a Pontianak flying across the road. According to mythology, this Pontianak represents a woman who perished while giving birth and is seeking retribution. She rips the internal organs off of guys in particular. These drivers asserted that this Pontianak seems like a stunning young woman dressed in white who has the power to change heads. She frequently stands by the side of the road requesting a ride. It's wise to avoid stopping for anyone or anything, especially at night on the Karak Highway, even though it's unclear whether this story involves an extraterrestrial being or a real crazy murderer. So, if you're traveling on the Karak Highway, keep your windows up, doors locked, and don't stop for anything. Safe travels.